This is Chapter 6 of the Ersatz Elevator. Morning is one of the best times for thinking. When one has just woken up but hasn't yet gotten out of bed, it is the perfect time to look up at the ceiling, consider one's life, and wonder what the future will hold. The morning I am writing this chapter, I am wondering if the future will hold something that will enable me to saw through these handcuffs and crawl out of the double-locked window. But in the case of the Baudelaire orphans, when the morning sun shone through the 849 windows in the squalor penthouse, they were wondering if the future would hold knowledge of the trouble they felt closing in around them. Violet watched the first few rays of sunlight brighten her sturdy, tool-free workbench and tried to imagine what sort of evil plan Gunther had cooked up. Klaus watched the dawn's rays make shifting shapes on the wall that separated his room from the squalor library and racked his brain for a way Gunther could have vanished into the thin air. And Sonny watched the emerging sun illuminate all of the unbiteable baby toys and tried to figure out if they had time to discuss the matter together before the squalors came to wake them up. The last thing was fairly easy to figure out. The littlest Baudelaire crawled out of her bedroom door, fetched her brother, and opened Violet's door to find her out of bed and sitting at her wooden bench with her hair tied up in a ribbon to keep it out of her eyes. "Tagib," Sonny said. "Good morning," Violet replied. "I thought it might help me think if I tied my hair up and sat at my workbench as if I were inventing something. But I haven't figured out a thing." "It's terrible enough that Olaf has shown up again," Klaus said, "and that we have to call him Gunther, but we don't have the faintest clue what he's planning." "Well, he wants to get his hands on our fortune, that's for sure," Violet said. "Clofey," Sonny said, which meant, "Of course, but how?" "Maybe it has something to do with the inn auction," Klaus guessed. Why would he disguise himself as an auctioneer if it weren't part of the plan? Sonny yawned, and Violet reached down and lifted up her sister so she could sit on her lap. "Do you think he's going to try to auction us off?" Violet asked, as Sonny leaned forward to nibble on the workbench and thought, "He could get one of those terrible assistants of his to bid higher and higher for us until he won, and then we'd be in his clutches, just like the poor Quagmires." "But Esme said it's against the law to auction off children," Klaus pointed out. Sonny stopped chewing on the workbench and looked at her siblings. "No?" she asked, which meant something like, "Do you think the squalors are working together with Gunther?" "I don't think so," Violet said. "They've been very kind to us." "Well, Jerome has, at least. And anyway, they don't need the Baudelaire fortune. They have so much money already." "But not much common sense," Klaus said unhappily. "Gunther fooled them completely, and all it took were some black boots, a pinstripe suit, and a monocle." "Plus, he fooled them into thinking that he had left," Violet said, but the doorman was certain that he hadn't. "Gunther's got me fooled, too," Klaus said. "How could he have left without the doorman noticing?" "I don't know," Violet said miserably. "The whole thing is like a jigsaw puzzle, but there are too many missing pieces to solve it." "Did I hear someone say jigsaw puzzles?" Jerome asked. "If you're looking for some jigsaw puzzles, I think there are a few in the cabinet in one of the sitting rooms, or maybe in one of the living rooms. I can't remember which." The Baudelaires looked up and saw their guardian standing in the doorway of Violet's bedroom with a smile on his face and a silver tray in his hands. "Good morning, Jerome," Klaus said. "And thank you, but we're not looking for a jigsaw puzzle. Violet was just using an expression. We're trying to figure something out." "Well, you'll never figure anything out on an empty stomach," Jerome replied. "I have some breakfast here for you, 3 poached eggs and some nice whole wheat toast." "Thank you," Violet said. "It's very nice of you to fix us breakfast." "You're very welcome," Jerome replied. "Esme has an important meeting with the King of Arizona today, so we have the whole day to ourselves. I thought we could walk across town to the clothing district and take your pinstripe suits to a good tailor. There's no use having those suits if they don't fit you properly." "Niliu!" Sonny shrieked, which meant, "That's very considerate of you." "I don't know what Niliu means," Esme said, walking into the bedroom. "And I don't care. But neither will you when you hear the fantastic news I just received on the phone. Aqueous martinis are out, and parsley soda is in." "Parsley soda?" Jerome said, frowning. "That sounds terrible. I think I'll stick to aqueous martinis." "You're not listening," Esme said. "Parsley soda is in now. You'll have to go out right now and buy a few crates of it." "But I was going to take the children's suits to the tailor today," Jerome said. "Then you'll have to change your plans," Esme said impatiently. "The children already have clothing, but we don't have any parsley soda." "Well, I don't want to argue," Jerome said. "Then don't argue," Esme replied. "And don't take the children with you either. The beverage district is no place for young people. Well, we better go, Jerome. I don't want to be late for his Arizona Highness. But don't you want to spend some time with the Baudelaires before the workday begins? Jerome asked. Not particularly, Esme said, and looked briefly at her watch. I'll just say good morning to them. Good morning. Well, let's go, Jerome. Jerome opened his mouth to say something. Jerome opened his mouth as if he had something else to say, but Esme was already marching out of the bedroom, so he just shrugged. Have a good day, he said to the children. There's food in all of our kitchens, so you can make yourselves lunch. I'm sorry that our plans didn't work out after all. Hurry up, Esme called from down the hallway, and Jerome ran out of the room. The children heard their guardian's footsteps grow fainter and fainter as they made their way to the front door. Well, Klaus said, when they couldn't hear them anymore, what shall we do today? Winfrey, Sonny said. Sonny's right, Violet said. We'd better spend the day figuring out what Gunther's up to. How can we know what he's up to, Klaus said, when we don't even know where he is? Well, we'd better find out, Violet said. He already had the unfair advantage of the element of surprise, and we don't want him to have the unfair advantage of a good hiding place. This penthouse has lots of good hiding places, Klaus said. There are so many rooms. Kundik, Sonny said, which meant something like, but he can't be in the penthouse. Esme saw him leave. Well, maybe he sneaked back in, Violet said, and is lurking around right now. The Baudelaires looked at one another and then at Violet's doorway, half expecting to see Gunther standing there, looking at them with his shiny, shiny eyes. If he was lurking around here, Klaus said, wouldn't he have grabbed us the instant the squallers went out? Maybe, Violet said, if that was his plan. The Baudelaires looked at the empty doorway again. I'm scared, Klaus said. Ecriff, Sonny agreed. I'm scared too, Violet admitted. But if he's here in the penthouse, we'd better find out. We'll have to search the entire place and see if we find him. I don't want to find him, Klaus said. Let's run downstairs and call Mr. Poe instead. Mr. Poe is in a helicopter looking for the Quagmire triplets, Violet said. By the time he returns, it may be too late. We have to figure out what Gunther is up to, not only for our sake, but for the sake of Isadora and Duncan. At the mention of the Quagmire triplets, all three Baudelaires felt a stiffening of their resolve, a phrase which here means realized that they had to search the penthouse for Gunther, even though it was a scary thing to do. The children remembered how hard Duncan and Isadora had worked to save them from Olaf's clutches back at Proof Rock Preparatory School, doing absolutely everything they could to help the Baudelaires escape Olaf's evil plan. The Quagmires had sneaked out in the middle of the night and put themselves in grave danger. The Quagmires had to put on disguises, risking their lives in order to try to fool Olaf. And the Quagmires had done a lot of researching, finding out the secret of VFD, although they had been snatched away before they could reveal the secret to the Baudelaires. Violet, Klaus, and Sonny thought about the two brave and loyal triplets and knew they had to be just as brave and loyal now that they had an opportunity to save their friends. You're right, Klaus said to Violet, and Sonny nodded in agreement. We have to search the penthouse, but it's such a complicated place. I get lost just trying to find the bathroom at night. How can we search without getting lost? Hansel, Sonny said. The two older Baudelaires looked at one another. It was rare that Sonny said something that her siblings couldn't understand, but this seemed to be one of those times. Do you mean we should draw a map? Violet asked. Sonny shook her head. Gretel, she said. That's 2 times we don't understand you, Klaus said. Hansel and Gretel? What does that mean? Oh, Violet cried suddenly. Hansel and Gretel means Hansel and Gretel. You know, those 2 dim-witted children in the fairy tale. Of course, Klaus said. That brother and sister who insist on wandering around the woods by themselves. Leaving a trail of breadcrumbs, Violet said, picking up a piece of toast from the breakfast tray Jerome had brought them. So they don't get lost. We'll crumble up this toast and leave a few crumbs in every room so we know we've already searched it. Good thinking, Sonny. Obliged, Sonny said modestly, which meant something like, it's nothing. And I'm sorry to say she turned out to be right. For as the children wandered from bedroom to living room to dining room to breakfast room to snack room to sitting room to standing room to ballroom to bathroom to kitchen to those rooms that seemed to have no purpose at all and back again, leaving trails of toast crumbs wherever they went, Gunther was nowhere to be found. They looked in the closets of each bedroom and the cabinets in each kitchen and even pulled back the shower curtains in each bathroom to see if Gunther was hiding behind them. They saw racks of clothes in closets, cans of food in the cabinets, and bottles of cream rinse in the shower. But the children had to admit it. As the morning ended and the Baudelaire's own trail of crumbs led them back to Violet's room, that they had found nothing. Where in the world can Gunther be hiding? Klaus asked. We've looked everywhere. Maybe he was moving around, Violet said. He could have been in a room behind us all the time, jumping into the hiding places we already checked. I don't think so, Klaus said. We surely would have heard him if he was clomping around in those silly boots. I don't think he's been in this penthouse since last night. Esme insists that he left the apartment, but the doorman insists that he didn't. It doesn't add up. I've been thinking that over, Violet said. I think it might add up. Esme insists that he left the penthouse. The doorman insists that he didn't leave the building. That means he could be in any of the other apartments at 667 Dark Avenue. You're right, Klaus said. Maybe he'd rented one of the apartments on another floor as a headquarters for his latest scheme. Or maybe one of the apartments belongs to someone in his theater troupe, Violet said, and counted those terrible people on her fingers. There's the hook-handed man, or the bald man with the long nose, or that one who looks like neither a man nor a woman. Or maybe those two dreadful powdered-faced women, the ones who helped kidnap the Quagmires, her roommates, Klaus said. Sonny said, which meant something like, or maybe Gunther managed to trick one of the other residents of 667 Dark Avenue into letting him into their apartment. And then he tied them up and is sitting there hiding in the kitchen. If we find Gunther in the building, Violet said, then at least the Squallers will know that he is a liar, even if they don't believe he's really Count Olaf. They'll be very suspicious if he's caught hiding in another apartment. But how are we going to find out, Klaus asked. We can't simply knock on doors and ask to see each apartment. We don't have to see each apartment, Violet said. We can listen to them. Klaus and Sonny looked at their sister in confusion for a moment and then began to grin. You're right, Klaus said. If we walk down the stairs listening at every door, we may be able to tell if Gunther is inside. Lorigo, Sonny shrieked, which meant, what are we waiting for? Let's go. Not so fast, Klaus said. It's a long trip down all those stairs, and we've already done a lot of walking and crawling in your case, Sonny. We'd better change into our sturdiest shoes and bring along some extra pairs of socks. That way we can avoid blisters. And we should bring some water, Violet said, so we won't get thirsty. Snack! Sonny shrieked, and the Baudelaire orphans went to work, changing out of their pajamas and into appropriate stair-climbing outfits, putting on their sturdiest shoes and tucking pairs of extra socks into their pockets. After Violet and Klaus made sure that Sonny had tied her shoes correctly, the children left their bedrooms and followed their crumbs down the hallway, through a living room, past 2 bedrooms, down another hallway, and into the nearest kitchen, sticking together the whole time so they wouldn't lose one another in the enormous penthouse. In the kitchen, they found some grapes, a box of crackers, and a jar of apple butter, as well as a bottle of water that the Squallers used for making aqueous martinis, but that the Baudelaires would use to quench their thirst during their long climb. Finally, they left the penthouse apartment, walking past the elevator doors, and stood at the top of the curving stairway, feeling more like they were about to go mountain climbing than downstairs. We'll have to tiptoe, Violet said, so that we can hear Gunther, but he can't hear us. We should probably whisper, Klaus whispered, so that we can eavesdrop without people eavesdropping on us. Philivim, Sonny said, which meant, let's get started. And the Baudelaires got started, tiptoeing down the first curve of the stairway and listening at the door of the apartment directly below the penthouse. For a few seconds they heard nothing, but then very clearly they heard a woman talking on the phone. Well, that's not Gunther, Violet whispered. He's not a woman. Klaus and Sonny nodded, and the children tiptoed down the next curve to the floor below. As soon as they reached the next door, it flung open to reveal a very short man in a pinstripe suit. See you later, Avery, he called, and with a nod to the children, shut the door and began walking down the stairs. That's not Gunther either, Klaus whispered. He's not that short, and he's not calling himself Avery. Violet and Sonny nodded, and the children tiptoed down the next curve to the floor below the floor below. They stopped and listened at this door and heard a man's voice call out, I'm going to take a shower, Mother, and Sonny shook her head. Menak, she whispered, which meant Gunther would never take a shower. He's filthy. Violet and Klaus nodded, and the children tiptoed down the next curve, and then the next, and then the next, and plenty more after that, listening at each door, whispering briefly to one another and moving on. As they walked farther and farther down the stairway, they began to grow tired, as they always did when making their way to or from the Squaller's apartment. But this time, they had additional hardships as well. The tips of their toes grew tired from all that tiptoeing. Their throats grew hoarse from all that whispering. Their ears were aching from listening at all those doors, and their chins drooped from nodding in agreement that nothing they heard sounded like Gunther. The morning wore on, and the Baudelaires tiptoed and listened, whispered and nodded, and by the time they reached the lobby of the building, it seemed that every physical feature of the Baudelaire orphans was suffering in some way from the long climb. That was exhausting, Violet said, sitting down on the bottom step and passing around the bottle of water. Exhausting and fruitless. Grape, Sunny said. No, Sunny, Violet said. I didn't mean we didn't have any fruit. I just meant we didn't learn anything. Do you think we missed a door? No, Klaus said, shaking his head and passing around the crackers. I made sure. I even counted the number of floors this time so we could double check them on the way up. It's not 48 or 84. It's 66, which happens to be the average of those two numbers. 66 floors and 66 doors, and not a peep from Gunther behind any of them. I don't understand it, Violet said miserably. If he's not in the penthouse and he's not in any of the other apartments and he hasn't left the building, where could he be? Maybe he is in the penthouse, Klaus said, and we just didn't spot him. Bashui, Sunny said, which meant, or maybe he is in one of the other apartments and we just didn't hear him. Or maybe he has left the building, Violet said, spreading apple butter on a cracker and giving it to Sunny. We can ask the doorman. There he is. Sure enough, the doorman was at his usual post by the door and was just noticing the three exhausted children sitting on the bottom step. Hello there, he said, walking up to them and smiling from beneath the wide brim of his hat. Sticking out of his long sleeves were a small starfish carved out of wood and a bottle of glue. I was just going to put up this ocean decoration when I thought I heard someone walking down the stairs. We just thought we'd have lunch here in the lobby, Violet said, not wanting to admit that she and her siblings had been listening at doors, and then hiked back up. I'm sorry, but that means that you're not allowed back up to the penthouse, the doorman said, and shrugged his shoulders inside his oversized coat. You'll have to stay here in the lobby. After all, my instructions were very clear. You are not supposed to return to the Squalor penthouse until the guests left. I let you go up last night because Mr. Squalor said that your guest was probably on his way down, but he was wrong because Gunther never showed up in the lobby. You mean Gunther still hasn't left the building? Violet asked. Of course not, the doorman said. I'm here all day and all night, and I haven't seen him leave. I promise you that Gunther has never walked out of this door. When do you sleep? Klaus asked. I drink a lot of coffee, the doorman answered. It just doesn't make any sense, Violet said. Sure it does, the doorman said. Coffee contains caffeine, which is a chemical stimulant. Stimulants keep people awake. I didn't mean the part about the coffee, Violet said. I mean the part about Gunther. Esme, that's Mrs. Squalor, is positive that he left the penthouse last night while we were at the restaurant. But you are equally positive that he didn't leave the building. It's a problem that doesn't seem to have a solution. Every problem has a solution, the doorman said. At least that's what a close associate of mine says. Sometimes it just takes a long time to find the solution, even if it's right in front of your nose. The doorman smiled at the Baudelaires, who watched him walk over to the sliding elevator doors. He opened the bottle of glue and made a small globby patch on one of the doors, and then held the wooden starfish against the glue in order to attach it. Gluing things to a door is never a very exciting thing to watch, and after a moment, Violet and Sunny turned their attention back to their lunch and the problem of Gunther's disappearance. Only Klaus kept looking in the direction of the doorman as he continued to decorate the lobby. The middle Baudelaire looked and looked and looked and kept on looking even when the glue dried and the doorman went back to his post at the door. Klaus kept facing the ocean decoration that was now firmly attached to one of the elevator doors, because he realized now, after a tiring morning of searching the penthouse and an exhausting afternoon of eavesdropping on the stairs, that the doorman had been right. Klaus didn't move his face one bit because he realized that the solution was, indeed, right in front of his nose.